All right, welcome everyone. Carmel Ecker, Speaking of Life Coaching. I'm a single parent empowerment coach, and this is I can't remember, three or four. I already can't remember how many I've done of an interview series about topics that are relevant and interesting to single parents. And today I have with me Lara Gregory, and I'm just going to let Lara. I'm going to let you tell the people what you do because you're the expert at it. So yeah, just share what you do.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on your I'm going to call it a talk show. I don't know if you call it that, but let's
Sure, let's
call it
call it
that.
a talk show.
My name is I'm Lara Gregory, and I am an intimacy coach. So I work with individuals. I want to say pairings because I've learned that couples I think tend to bring up male female in people's brains. So paired people, and groups actually around helping you navigate your relationships, cause intimacy in your life, and ignite your sex life. In a nutshell, that's what I
Yes.
do.
So all
Yes.
the things that people don't always like to talk about in public.
Yeah, that's right. Or even in private, but yes.
Yes, and
Yeah.
part of the reason that I have you here today, even though you kind of tend to focus on pairs, is that, when we become single parents, it's not like our intimacy, our need for intimacy and connection and sexuality just kind of like cuts off. Like that just
Right.
doesn't happen. We still have those needs. And we can access those as individuals. We don't have to be part of a pair in order to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're kind of going to do a two-parter here. So we're going to discuss first a little bit about preparing yourself to date again.
Yeah.
And in part two, what did I write? We're going to talk about, yeah, right, being a single person and actually choosing not to date, or just, what do you do when you happen to not be dating, right? Ways that you can get your needs, your needs
Yes.
fulfilled.
The fun part of this conversation.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So, what are some practical tips that you have for people, but both men and women, because there are men and women single parents, to get ready to start dating again?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so what comes to mind first when you ask that question is allowing yourself some support and a process. There are many. I've got a handful in my back pocket, but there are many processes that allow you to do as in coach language, get complete about your past relationship or relationships, or even just how dating's gone up until now, right? Because anyone can get discouraged, frustrated. I hear that a lot, right? Around how it goes. So supporting yourself to get complete around how it has gone, like literally up until today. Meaning, you're kind of clearing out any energy about it, all the anything that's still residual, so that if you think about it, you're like, yes, I was once married and we have a child, and now I'm doing my life. Like it literally is, like, I think I've heard it termed like last week's lunch. It's not
Right.
full of stuff anymore for you.
It's not full of emotion. You're
Yeah.
not churning up tons of stories, as we say in coaching,
Yeah, not lots of
stories
energy
around it.
spent on it. Yeah. Yeah. So allowing that to be complete.
Yeah, that
That's one thing.
sounds like a solid plan.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then the beautiful thing is once you've done that, is that you then get to create like your present and your future from a clear space, a clear kind of internal experience. And then what we find is that, like, so much possibility opens up. Like you're able to see things, identify things, take action around things that you might not have been before because it was so cluttered, right? There was that clutter still hanging around.
Right, right. It's like that idea of baggage, right? That you're
Yeah.
still, if you don't get clear on what's happened in the past, you're carrying around this baggage and it can start to get heavy after a while and you're taking that into your new relationship. There are good odds that
Yeah.
a lot of the same patterns are going to repeat themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that just popped in my head hearing you say that is there's actually the clearing out the baggage, and then there's sometimes might be just habits too, right? So if you catch yourself like, I don't know, slamming the ex, whatever, whoever, you may not be complete. And so there might be a little bit you can do there, but you also just might be in the habit of doing that. And that's just like, let's break that habit because it's not serving you, right? We can get into those habits of talking about things a certain way or repeating the story, I think, as I heard you say earlier. Yeah.
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 And like it's so true. We can have good habits and we can have bad habits. And we generally associate that with, just the way we're behaving on a daily basis. We don't necessarily associate it with our relationships. So it's really important to identify and be aware that we do have habitual ways of being in relationship
Yes.
that may not be serving us
Yeah, anymore. Like, because most of that
anymore.
stuff does come from a place at one point it was brilliant and it did exactly what it needed to do, but yeah, not anymore for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing I definitely suggest. And like I said, there's I guarantee if you went searching, there's probably endless tools that would support someone through that process. And as a coach, I know I work with people most times, more often than not, I start service with somebody by getting complete about what they've come to be concerned about, if that makes sense. Because we want to
get clear about what.
Yeah, so we get complete if they're coming to me because they're concerned about their sexual experiences or their relationship, or they're not getting what they want, or any of those things. Completion will usually be in the first handful of sessions because we want to support you to envision a future from being clear of all that stuff. It not right, because I'm just thinking like, if it's a good example is if I'm not complete around, let's just say an ex, it's such an easy one, and we pretty much all have one or two or many, depends on the person. We're still like hurt by how it went down or how it ended. We're likely to bring forward not just some patterns, like you said, but also like a limited sense of belief about what could happen. And our vision might kind of really shrink. And, because there's some fear and some pain still guiding our actions and our choices. Yeah.
The ability to actually envision the relationship that you want gets stunted by the patterns of your the patterns of your past. You have this belief that, oh, this is how it's always gone, and that's probably
that's a great example. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the other thing that comes up when I hear you ask, like, if you're choosing to date or getting prepared to date, or that's like what's current or up next for you, is to really take a look at what you really want. And that sounds easy, but it's simple but not easy. I think that's the saying I've heard.
Yeah.
Because, well, for lots of reasons, but including that sometimes we don't admit to ourselves what we want, right? Or we're still following kind of scripts and social conditioning, and that I'm supposed to want this, or a guy that's like this, or a woman that's like this, or even a type of relationship that operates this way, right? Like marriage is a great example of that. And I'm not slamming marriage, but like it comes with social scripts that most of us know, I think, right? Or have learned on some level, even if we didn't try to, because it's out there, it's everywhere. And so getting really clear on what you want in terms of a relationship, and where I distinguish, because I know people make lists about who they want as a person. I haven't found that very helpful for folks, because like it's more around what you want in the relationship. So conditions of satisfaction in the relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What would be an example of, setting a condition within the relationship that you want versus like a characteristic you're looking for in a person?
Right. So characteristic might be like, I want him to be tall, like muscled, and blue eyes and brown hair. I mean, go for it. You can. Like, I know. I was thinking that. You can totally do it, but like I think that I find that narrows people's capacity and possibility in relationships for sure. Yeah. And also you could throw that in because maybe you'll get all the other stuff plus that. Like I don't want to shut that down.
Let's not limit.
Yeah, that's exactly. But it would be more around, it could really be straightforward things like well, it could be simple if we need to live together. Like if at some point, I get we don't start there day one. It could be that person needs to want marriage too, because you do. It could be the opposite. You want commitment, but not in the context of marriage. It could be we need to, even during the dating, it could be like, you could have kind of dating and long-term relationship. You need to know if you want a long-term relationship or a dating relationship or a casual relationship, right? Because they're all fine. but being clear about what you want. Some people want to date for like forever because they love it and it's a blast and it's fun for them and they're not interested in long-term commitment at this time. Some people want casual for whatever their reasons are, and then some people are looking for that longer term commitment, that long-term commitment. And my training and my beliefs align with this, is that they're all fine, they're all totally healthy and acceptable, but like, honor what you're doing, honor the one you're choosing. So if you honor casual, that looks different than not honoring casual. I always have this thing in my mind, having dabbled in all three, to be just transparent, is that you can have a one night stand that is completely lovingly respectful. It could be as fantastically sparkful as well, but like, like you can honor a whole human being and have a one-time experience with them if you choose to, right? So like, just honor what you're choosing and the person you're doing it with. And then like, it also could be things like, needs to be willing to like communicate, and that doesn't mean they've mastered it, because you probably haven't either, but that they're willing to work at it, right? Like that's sort of like, and you might also have some bottom lines, like no active addiction, and there can't be violence, or maybe you aren't willing to be with someone who drinks or at all or uses drugs at all, like, right? You need to know what's okay for you. It might be really important that they have a ongoing active relationship with their family, because that's important to you to have in your life. It might be they need to be independent financially, because that you want you both to be thriving. Like, it could be lots of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can see how this would be important to figure out before you start dating, because
Because then
we
the
start
hormones start.
exactly right. We get all hot and bothered and excited about this new person, and it's got this beautiful, fresh energy, and
Yeah.
you kind of maybe not fully like fall in love, but all the happy, yummy, sexy chemicals are like coursing through your body, and
Right.
you get invested, and then it's very hard to divest yourself from that situation.
Well, yeah, and then you add the total human part where we project, and we've got our fantasies usually are in there, which is like, again, totally normal. And like, we have we're projecting our wants on that person and don't even know we're doing it. And then we probably played out the relationship to death until we're both 20 years from now, and we don't even know the person yet, right? We don't actually know who they are, how they operate in life. I actually had a therapist, a consultant, was suggest to me. And for at the time, this was a new concept, just again, to be transparent, at the time it was, that like, it's years before we know somebody. And that doesn't mean you don't get to fall in love and get married before that time frame, but just to know that like, I'm coaching somebody right now who is 3 years into a marriage, 4 years into a relationship, and we're acknowledging that you're really just getting to know each other.
Right.
Really. Right? They don't know how they deal with big bad fights, the ugly ones. They don't yet know if each other's going to stick around when things get hard. Like, they haven't been through that. They're really just getting, they don't know how they deal with all the stressors yet. Like, I mean, we're learning constantly, but I thought that was interesting. We were chatting about it. It's just like, yeah, you're really just getting to know each other still.
Yeah, which feels so weird after, a number of years of being together, particularly if you're married and
Yeah.
or live together. You think, well, we've been together long enough. We surely know each other super well. And you might also be putting on some blinders about things that, that's okay. That's not such a big deal. And so that kind
Yeah.
of
I
stifles
can
that
live with
ability of
that.
really getting to know that person, and really being honest with each other, I think.
Yeah, and I think to add in there, from compassion and as best as we can, non-judgment. Like, we're human, so, and our brains know, like, they're built to judge for survival reasons. But like, I just remember dating someone, and I remember just observing. It was really cool to be in a place where I was like, oh, you do that, okay, like, duly. It was kind of like duly noted. I didn't notice that before, and it was when. And I don't want to interpret like their why, but what it felt like to me was when they felt challenged, either it was about like, even if it was them or something they cared about, they did a tough guy thing. Like, they put on their street kind of, and I kind of was like, oh, cool. Didn't know I didn't know that about you. And I just sort of watched it play out. And in that moment, I don't need to decide if I can live with that or not live with that. But I mean, it was like, notice it. I didn't sort of, erase it or make up a story or make it be less than it was. He literally was kind of pulling, like, our own survival mechanisms. He's got some from literally the street for real. And it comes on in certain situations. So it's like, okay, like, that's not necessarily going to go away. Probably isn't. It might show up less and less as we mature, but it doesn't disappear, So yeah.
Probably not. Learn
Yeah.
behaviors like that take a long time. Well, and if they're not aware of it, it'll really never go away.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, again, I think there's different perspectives on this, but the one I work from is that, like, our survival mechanisms are those defense mechanisms we learn whenever we do, but usually quite young, that we carry with us in adulthood, which is, where some of our trouble kind of comes up. Our goal isn't to, like, annihilate them and make them disappear. Our goal is to make friends with them, get to know them so they don't run the show. But they're not going to disappear they're part of who we are, right?
Yeah.
So that might, again, for that, using that person example, with some self-awareness and maybe feedback from, if I became his loved one and he was willing to hear me, like, might become something that hardly ever shows up. Or if it does, he's able to go, oh yeah, there it is. Like, not going to engage. I'm not going to go there, Yeah. But I think that's just that reality of accepting someone for who they are, for who they really are, not who we want them to be.
Oh goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Right? That I think
I struggle with that. I may until the day I die, actually, but
I don't think you're alone in that. I don't think you're alone in that. We have this optimism, we'll meet someone and we get to know them and we've got this really starry-eyed vision of who they are to us. And part of what can get wrapped up in that is who we actually want them to be for us, right?
Yeah.
And then when it becomes apparent that that's not 100% true, that's not 100% reality, that's where there can be some conflicts that come up, because you're then you have an expectation that that person is going to change and get closer to this vision of who you want them to be, and that just may never happen.
Yeah. And I think that's the value of getting to know ourselves, right? Is like, in that, like, what do we know is predictable then? Well, for me, when that happens, less so these days, but my knee jerk, and I catch myself now, but I never used to, is I will make that person be who I want them to be. It's amazing what I can do to try and, like, make that true. Like, when I look back historically, it's like, wow, it was a strong survival mechanism, like, really quite powerful. And now I can catch myself kind of want to, like, it shows up and it's like, oh, I can kind of be, oh, there it is. Like, no, I really need to practice just accepting them for who they are. And then, eventually deciding, is this working for me? Is this relationship working for me?
Yeah. And there's something like on the back of this whole idea of what do I want? What do I want in a relationship? And does it match up with what that other person wants in a relationship? Like, there's an important conversation or series of conversations that needs to happen, like, fairly close to the beginning. And how do you have that conversation around, well, what do I want and what do you want, and do those two things align? Like, can you have those in a way that's not very, like, robotic, like, so here's my list of things that I want.
Exactly.
Please make sure that you have your list prepared and we'll go line by line, like,
this is a business agreement.
Yes, and it becomes very transactional, as opposed to having that beautiful, natural, I'm getting to know you, you're getting to know me, and this is fun and it's exciting and interesting. Like, how do you maintain that and still make sure that you're covering those bases of, do we want the same things?
Yes. And curiosity is such a beautiful guide for that, right? If we can practice staying in curiosity about self and other, really, right? That partner. Because from curiosity, we're usually it's generally hangs out with, like, love and compassion, right? Curiosity. Yeah. Versus, can I grill you and make lots of judgments about you, or whatever might be at the other end of that. But yeah, and it's interesting because I hope it's okay that I throw in my own dating experience examples here and there. But
I love it. It's so great.
Was the loveliest man. I remember we had this like beautiful, playful connection right from the beginning. we were clearly attracted to each other, like on a, like both energetic, I would say, and like kind of physical, sexual level. And on paper, like based on our first couple of conversations, we wanted a lot of the same things. And then when we tried to actually hang out again, like we literally at one point were like, oh my God, this is a gong show. Like, I don't like, did we just let it go? Because I was working 5 days a week, long hours. So dating at 9 o'clock at night wasn't really a thing during a work week for me at that point in time. Weekend, he had part-time children, he had part-time children, he had children with him, part-time, his children. And then was traveling a lot for work, like having a great time. He was doing what he wanted to be doing, and he was creating some freedom in his work. And that was the pieces that aligned. And then I was just like, but he was gone when I was free. And when I was free, you know what I mean? Like it never matched up. Like we did 2 months went by and we literally had no days where we both were free and in the same town. And so we kind of just let it go because like, I'm not sure what we were going to do there, you know?
Yeah.
So like on paper versus in practice too, I think, you know, hanging out in that for a little bit too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be hard to let that go. Like, you've met this person and, we get all wrapped up in, oh, but I want to be in a relationship and this person's so great and that, and it's an amazing thing to be able to just go, for whatever reason, this isn't working. And I'm going to trust that.
We may circle back. For all I know,
Yeah.
him and I will encounter each other again. I actually live closer to where he was traveling to now. I don't know. Like it could. This was 5 years ago. Like you just never know.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of that. If we're meant to connect again, we will. But yeah. And then it's interesting because I was reflecting on that at the time, and I'd done it again since, actually, when I was really attracted to someone, like on a kind of more intense level, where I will bend myself into a pretzel to make that work, because he was just living his life as he should be, in my opinion. And I would have been like, oh, you're only around for these 2 days in the next 2 weeks, and I work a 12-hour day, but that's okay, even though I really need to go home and sleep. Like and again, that's not always going to be a wrong decision, just at the time would have been for me. Because maybe you're good to have a night with no sleep and you're fine, right? With very little sleep. But I would have been pretzeling and being like, let's find something at 9:30 p.m. that we can make happen. And I would never been able to sustain that though, right? I couldn't have lived with that.
Yeah, and you bring up a really important point that we need to establish before we consider getting into any relationship. What are my boundaries? What are my non-negotiables in terms of what you're willing to put in and what you're not willing to put in? In the case of single parents, it might be I have my time set with my kids, and that is non-negotiable. Like you are not allowed to usurp that time. Like I'm not going to get a babysitter. I'm not like that is my time with my kids. Or I'm trying to think of another potential scenario. Anyways, that one will do.
Yeah,
But just like setting those boundaries. What am I willing to contribute to that? Like, what am I willing to put into this relationship to make it work? And what am I not willing to put in for my own well-being and health? Like not twisting yourself into a pretzel.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But then, there's always that fine balance too. And I have to catch myself in this, and I get like, I have supports that kind of support me in this, where it's like, yeah, but like also allow for just things to happen too. Like if, one of those nights there was this beautiful opportunity, like I might not be so rule bound about my boundaries that I'd be like, no way, I can't, because I said, like, I think there's that dance too.
Absolutely.
That's easier. Again, not always so clear, but
yeah.
Because it's humans in relationships, and it's clear and it's not clear, right? It's not predictable, and it is. Yeah.
And just knowing to like, does this feel good, or does this feel like I'm twisting myself into a pretzel for this person? And being able, like, being really in tune with yourself to know the difference.
Yeah. And there's a conversation I'm going to say on social media is where I see it the most right now around, I've heard it termed lots of ways, and I might be using terms in different ways than some people know it right now, but like the what do they call it? The twin flame, and like different language like that around, you meet someone, there's an intense attraction, but it's like kind of total chaos and pain most of the time. And that like, you like stay there because you're going to learn about yourself, which I get it. I totally get it. And I had this colleague who she's in somatic sex education with me. She's like, but what if you like chose someone who made you feel loved and important and wanted, and like all these things that just made me a whole nervous system go, oh, like yeah, like how wonderful does that feel, you know? And there's no wrong choices. Like we do get to choose what we want. Maybe that's really exciting. I don't know, right? And I have gone into relationship for that because I do I historically liked excitement. It has changed with growth, which is interesting. But yeah, and then the boundaries thing, sort of, can I segue that into like,
Yeah.
how do we also look after ourselves, meet our needs? That, like we talked about connection, so that's conditions of satisfaction, knowing what you want. And then you said boundaries, and it made me think of Wheel of Consent, which is a tool I help teach people. And there's lots of free material online too, so you can just go learn about it, by Betty Martin, and she's wonderful. And it's a beautiful tool for learning your own consent from, and it's a very pleasure-based consent. So it's not like kind of, it gets into giving and receiving. So how we, and I always find this hard, like how can I explain it in 2 seconds? I sort of can. Giving and receiving. So there's sort of like, if I'm you know, if you ask me for a massage because it'll make you feel better, and I like be like, yeah, totally, I'll give you a massage, right? I'm giving, you're receiving.
Yeah.
We sometimes pay for that, sometimes we get it through personal people. Ideally I'm checking in as the giver. Is it a wholehearted yes? Am I in consent, like truly to say, yes, I'll give you a massage, right? And then there's the same thing, but taking, allowing. So it's like, sorry, back up. The massage is, I am touching you for your benefit,
Right.
not for my benefit, right? I'm the massager in that case. In an intimate relationship, it might benefit both, for one, because I might get off on giving you a massage, and that might also be arousing. It might be arousing for me, for example, but they call it taking and allowing. So taking is, I might be asking, can I touch you in a certain way for me? Because I want to, and I like it. And you would be checking in with yourself and being like, yeah, I can literally gift you my body for that, for a little bit, you know, or however long, or once, or whatever. You learn to communicate, negotiate, and all that kind of stuff too with the tool. But yeah, and then allowing is, you know, you're allowing, right? So we do that in sexual, intimate relationships all the time, but we don't always have the language for it. So I find the Wheel of Consent is a beautiful thing around boundaries, like you just said. Like, you know, who am I doing it for? Like if I've got time with my kids and I'm kind of letting that slide because, you know, someone wants my attention who's super alluring, totally human, nothing wrong with that. But at that point, if you say yes to going, if you kind of say no to your kids and yes to him, you're probably saying, you could be saying yes for him and not for you. Does that make sense?
That totally
So
makes
just
sense.
to be
Yeah.
clear, just to know what you're doing. Like you can still choose it if you want. You can still say yes for him. That's like, people do that, and that's okay. But anyways, the Wheel of Consent's pretty cool for that. And it also like helps you get, it's a very hands-on practice tool. So you also get to experience touch and pleasure and learn about yourself and what feels good to you, and what you're willing to give and what you're willing to receive, and what you're not willing to give and not willing to receive. And then learning to negotiate in the best use of that word, because that can sound very transactional too. But
Yes, but it's an important conversation to have. Like, and like,
yeah,
transactional isn't necessarily all bad. Like, sometimes
no,
in order to get to the level of intimacy and connection and everything that you want, there has to be a transactional, somewhat transactional conversation up front so that everybody knows what the boundaries and parameters are, right? I mean, anyone who's been in a kink relationship knows that there is kind of a transactional element to it, because
boundaries are pretty darn clear. They're very clear,
yeah, they're very clear. Yeah.
usually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and that's the piece around like, can, like, if you don't, you need to know what you want and what you don't want, right? Because if you don't know what your no's are and you can't articulate them well enough, your yeses get pretty muddied. And like, you know, there's that trust factor too. Like if you're not clear on your no's, your yeses, like, are they real? Like, is that a real yes? Like, can I trust your no's and your yeses?
Yeah.
And that's personal work, right? For ourselves and for the people we relate with. And I always, I see that as like the no's and yeses as a gift, despite the fact that we all can have a lot of discomfort often with no's. You being clear about your no's. When I was 21, I kind of hated it because I think I was a bit boundaryless, but for both chosen and not, both within my will and against my will, so to speak. Some just learned in automatic and others because it seemed fun at the time. But now I'm just like, when I actually meet a guy who, and I just had this conversation yesterday, how off-putting the word no can be. Like, it can be really disconnecting, and learning to say no and stay connected. Wheel of consent can be great practice for that. And we talked about how, like, someone asks you for something. There was an example I was talking. Oh, right. I'd met someone new. They were talking about going out to the pub after a hike, which I used to do all the time, but it's COVID. I'm not doing it now. I don't do inside restaurant meeting things right now. It's one of my boundaries. And I wasn't prepared at all, which is fine, but they asked me. I think I did a bodily, like I can't, and I didn't know how to say no. I knew how to say no. Like, I did all the internal that happened, right? Because I knew I was going to say no. I kind of wasn't saying no to everything. And I was like, COVID, I've got practice. It was really, and we were just talking about how with practice, it might have really naturally come out with, like, great idea. I would super love to, but not until after COVID. Let's try this instead. Right? I froze, so it didn't go that way, but yeah. But that's where the hands-on, the actual embodied practice of consent and boundaries is brilliant, right? Because then if meant psychologically, you made the choice that my kid time is my kid time, it is non-negotiable. When that person who's offering you the thing that you really, really want, which is love and intention and touch and pleasure and stuff, then, like, you'll be able to be like, well, no, kid time non-negotiable. Might not say it that way, but I can negotiate this with you. Mm-hmm. Like, let's find another time, or I'm free as early as Tuesday afternoon, or yeah.
And I want to also bring up the idea of it's saying no because I have slotted me time is perfectly acceptable. And I think the kid time is, that's an easy no. No, that's time with my kids. But when it comes to stuff that we have said, oh, I'm going to do this for myself. And maybe it's a space of time of absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And as a single parent, that time is so, so, so precious.
Yeah.
And it's important to hold that sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And that love and connection you want to get. What's that?
It's your well-being. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings us maybe into this whole idea of, okay, so let's say there isn't someone else, or I'm not interested in dating, or it's just not working out right now. I think you called it earlier, in the meanwhile.
Yeah, I believe there was a book called that about 25 years ago, but yes. In the meanwhile.
Yeah, so in the meanwhile.
I do in the meanwhile, yeah.
Yeah, how do you get your needs met? I think I went backwards. For, connection, and also, an outlet for sexual energy, because like, let's be honest, that's gotta go somewhere or be used somehow.
Yes, be used. Yes. Right. It does. Yeah, I mean, I think connection overall, and I'm not skipping that last part. I'm going to circle back to it.
We'll come to it.
Connection for sure is, like, I think we do need, it's just like prioritizing things like the family time and the friends and all the other ways that we can feel connected to human beings in our community. And there's lots of ways to do that. And I think there's also allowing the concept that intimacy exists in all relationships. It's just not with our lover or our primary partner, right? We can have intimacy with a friend. We can have a certain amount of intimacy with a colleague. The boundaries might be different, but we can have intimacy with a neighbor or like a family member where we have a deeper connection, and there's definitely some very satisfying, connection. Mm-hmm. And then there's like our sexual pleasure, our eroticism, which can be expressed in so many different ways. So I think I'll touch on both, like, kind of indirect expression, what I would call almost an indirect expression, and then like a direct, like, as in, self-pleasure, masturbation, right? So indirect to me, so our sexuality, as far as I understand and believe, so I just like to clarify some of that as my beliefs, is like, sort of like, it's a birthright, that's for sure. And it's also like just inherent in all of us. It might not always be expressed. And if it's not, and it's silent or a black hole right now, that's also okay. And you don't have to, there's no need to fix that. Like, everything is normal. And if you're okay with it, then you're okay with it. If you're not okay with it, then you can get some support potentially. But yeah, sexual, like, so the sexual expression is everything from creative energy, right? That's sexual expression. There's like, I remember having a job once where I got to get hugged like 6 or 7 times a day. It was like heaven for me because I love being touched. And I didn't even know that until I got touched that often in a day. It was like, oh my God, why am I not had this my whole life? But we can set ourselves up for what we need, right? And that wasn't erotic touch. It was in a workplace. Like, I mean, there was some inappropriate things, but generally speaking, it was friendly, right? It was fitness industry. That's a whole other conversation.
I just want to know more about that job now.
It was really fun. Lots of hugs. I loved it. And we lots of play, right? So play, connection, touch. That was, I feel like those are good solid cornerstones: play, connection, and touch.
Absolutely.
For like well-being in terms of what you're talking about, touching on there. And then there's like, you know, our sexual pleasure. So, and I'm just mindful of time. I feel like we need to tie up shortly. So, yeah. So I'm a big fan of masturbation for human beings. I know not everyone's comfortable with it. Not everyone feels like it's okay. We absolutely get to have our beliefs on it. And hence why I touched on the indirect expression of sexuality, because if it's not there, you might be able to find other ways to kind of move its energy, right? To move that energy, either it's through dance or other ways of touch, or it doesn't have to be erotic. Like there's ways to, anyways, that's probably its own conversation, but yeah, I'm a fan of, yeah, self-pleasure, masturbation, making time for it, just like you might make time for a workout or time with your kids or time to prep a meal because you know it's good for you. And there's a really cool practice in some of the work I do. We call it mindful erotic practice. I did not coin that term, nor did I make up the kind of the structure of the practice, but it's completely flexible and you can do anything you want with it. But it's basically supporting you to be like, every day this week, I'm going to do some, you know, sexual practice, or maybe it's 3 times this week, or maybe it's just once, and I'm going to set aside at least 30 minutes, however many times I just said, you know, give yourself a little bit of structure. And if you want to follow like the mindful erotic practice, there's actually a worksheet if you like to have structure given to you from which to create off of. You can do that, or you can look at it and throw it out and say I don't want it, because it's all good. And it just gives you things to explore. Like, you know, you're going to start noticing, you're going to do kind of a body, you're kind of going to do some movement to get your sexual energy moving potentially. You're going to do a body scan just so you can notice all the sensations, because we can have sexual energy arousal and sensations like literally anywhere in our body, right? Toes, fingers, ears, yeah. And then it's going to allow you, you know, just support you to check in around your emotions. And then how do you want to be touched today? So it actually just gives you some structure to play with yourself. And what I love about it as much as anything is, first of all, you get to have pleasure if you want it. Orgasms are certainly welcome, but they're not required. So there's no, like, it's a low pressure kind of scenario ideally. And then like it feels good. And then like, if and when you're with somebody else, you can bring what you learned to that partnership, right? Or to that lovership.
I was just, as you were talking, I was like, oh my God, this kind of fits back into the category of preparing yourself for dating too, right?
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah.
There's an opportunity for an awakening for you of something that you maybe haven't tapped into previously for whatever reason, whether a past relationship, there were some, you know, no-go zones for your partner or anything like that.
Right.
Right. And this is an opportunity for you to maybe explore those things and
Yes.
say, do I like that? Don't I like that? You know,
Yeah.
how do I want to be touched? How, you know, what is like, just, I really don't enjoy that. And go into that new relationship with a new awareness.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you know, there's like kind of the stereotype of someone who hasn't been in a relationship for like, I don't know, a number of years, and they are super nervous about this. They've started dating someone, and like the approach of sex is coming in, and they're like, oh my God, like it feels like the Sahara down there and I don't know. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
but if you've been doing this kind of practice, right, a self-sexual practice, I'm just going to call it that.
Yeah.
I don't know if
That's totally,
that's a real thing.
totally accurate.
You know, you don't have to go in with so much nervousness and worry and like maybe a lot more confidence.
Yeah. And I also am just thinking here, you say that like a ready capacity to tap into your own erotic energy when you want to. Like, does that make sense? Versus like, I don't know where it went. It's somewhere, or, you know, and again, like you said, because we might be nervous and it's a new person. And I think a lot more clarity around, more practice around this is enough for me today. I want this, checking in with our body, like, while things are starting, like, either you're having a makeout session, which I hope people still do that. And it's like, in that, now I'm satisfied, so I'm going to pause things here, right? Or whatever, right? Or yeah, you're just going to be a lot more clear about noticing what your body says is okay for you, right? Because again, I'm going to touch on this before we run out of time, because this came up way at the beginning of the conversation, because the second those juices get flowing, the arousal hormones, we actually can't consent anymore. It's like we're drunk or on drugs. Like our brain is in a similar state. So really important to know what you're okay with and what you want
in advance.
And there's a recommendation that, like, don't up negotiate. So if you're like, I know I love like kissing, and I don't know this guy very well or girl very well, so I'm just going to stick with that. Like, having practice around sticking with that helps, right? And you may not always get it right because you're human, and that's fine. But just knowing, and then when juices get flowing, you're less likely to be like, forget it, I'm just gonna, wherever he takes me is good. You know what I mean? Like, because that's where that hangover thing after, where we might regret what happened, right? And that sort of thing's really kind of messy. So there's lots of practice around that can be really helpful. And practice might sound kind of boring and blah, and it isn't, but it's just literally like, you do it a lot in your body, you get pretty good at it, and it becomes a lot more of a new normal and a lot easier.
Yeah. And maybe we can come up with a different word than practice. I don't know.
I know, because I always think of, okay, nothing against yoga. Yoga's not my jam. I mean, no, it's not. I'm just gonna be honest. It's not really a thing I go to, but I have a great deal of respect for it. I do. But I like, practice makes me think of, it's like people use practice because homework bugs people. Like, people have triggers around, but I've developed a bit of a thing around practice where it is associated with slog now. I think I've done that to myself, but so play, I don't know.
Oh, I like play.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Playtime, something like that. I don't know. Anybody who's watching, they can find their own,
they can name it for themselves,
playful word that gets them excited, as opposed to practice. Some people practice might work for some people, but
and I think it's just pointing to the fact that if we want to get good at something, we need to do it regularly. If we want it to become a new normal, we have to practice it. It's like cartwheels. You don't get good at cartwheels by doing it 5 times.
No.
That's my gymnastics background. They say 1,000, I think, or something. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So go, well, that should be our party note. On that note, go masturbate 1,000 times. By the time you hit that number, imagine, like, who knows what's going to be different?
Who knows what you could tap into by the end of those 1,000 times?
1,000 times. This should be a new, like, I don't know, something course, Facebook page. I don't know.
I love it. Well, I think that, we should end on that note. Go
I think that's a good note.
Times. Go play 1,000 times, whatever word works for you.
Go play with your sexual energy in some way 1,000 times.
Yeah. And I think that's wonderful to bring into your life. I think that's actually, a really important wellness practice routine.
I think it's a fundamental well-being practice. Like, there's food, eat, sleep, and then there's what am I doing with my erotic energy? I think those kind of hang out on the base. There might be one more in there I'm missing, but yeah.
Wonderful.
Connection. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all that. That was I enjoyed, and I learned some new stuff, so that's wonderful. I always love, part of the reason I want to have these conversations is because I want to learn more stuff. I'm like a learning junkie. So now, how can people connect with you if they want to learn more about this stuff?
Yeah. So honestly, the most effective way, if people are willing, is to call or email me. So I can leave those. Do you want me to say those? Do I know my phone number? 778-717-7217, because that should be easy.
Sevens.
I know. I'm not and then my email is bodyandsoulwisdom. I know I should shorten that. All one word @gmail.com. Or you could just do my name, Lara Gregory 72 @gmail, because that might be easy to remember.
I'm going to put this in the notes.
You don't have to remember.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is a lot
So
of sevens. I didn't make up that phone number. And then I do have a website, www. Someone told me recently, you never have to say that again, but I still say it. LaraGregoryCoaching.com. It gives you a broad sweep. I don't have it set up to purchase services and that. You do need to connect with me directly to get details and to move forward into any kind of discovery session or moving forward to work together. So I really encourage people, if they're willing, it can feel a bit scary and might take some bravery sometimes, but shoot me a line and we'll find a time that works for you to talk, phone or video, and we can find out, you can find out everything you want to, and we can find out if it might be a good fit for you or if something else would be, because I got lots of things to refer people to as well.
that's awesome. Wonderful. Yeah. And is there like, do you have, I should have asked you this before, but do you have a blog or a freebie on your website that people can kind of check out?
I have, so on Facebook, I have a page called Self Pleasure Mastery at your, actually, maybe I just called it At Your Fingertips,
Okay.
where I'm growing my consistency and sharing there. Social media is not my biggest jam, but it's a great way to connect with people around mindful erotic practice. And I also have a free mindful erotic practice group that runs once a week. It will soon run twice a week. That may only be for like the slightly riskier taken folks.
Okay.
Well, because you're getting supported to self-pleasure. So you can
Yeah.
call me, you can also reach out to find a little bit more about that. Because I just like that practice space. And then possibly I haven't actually, so maybe I should, is maybe getting in some Wheel of Consent practice group, like happening once or twice a month, just so people can like learn about it and practice it.
Great. So there's lots of ways for people to get familiar with you, to maybe work with you, just kind of, yeah. So that's awesome. So I'll share all of those links in the notes under this video.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm so glad that we
Enjoyed
made this
this.
happen. I've enjoyed this conversation, and you may see me in one of your groups.
There you go. I'd love
That
to.
sounds. I'd like, I was telling you before we hopped on this call. I'm choosing to be single at the moment, because this is just, it's just where I am in my life, and the conditions are good for me to just be single right now and be, focusing on me, focusing on my son. And part of focusing on me is, figuring out more about my own sexuality and what do I want going forward. So yeah.
Awesome. Well,
And nobody needed to know that.
I think it's important. No, but that's a beautiful model for what we were talking about. So I appreciate you sharing that to everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's one way it can look. There are so many, but that's one way that can look. So awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And let's hop off and go enjoy the rest of our day.
That's right. Thank you.